Okay, thanks everybody for joining us today. We're actually very excited to be here. We're going to talk in a little bit more detail about demand response today. Very exciting topic for us, something we're very passionate about. So firstly, some housekeeping components. We're aiming to run for about 45 minutes, so half an hour for the presentation, about 15 minutes for discussion and questions. So if you've got any questions, I think you've got a little space there to type them in, so you can do that at any time. And when we get to the end, we'll go through and answer as many questions as we can. We'll also send out the slides and the recording at the end of the discussion. So anyone that you know maybe didn't get a chance to listen in, you can forward it on to them at any time as well. Or if you want to go back and listen to our fantastic voices, you can also do that. So. So today I've got David Evans and Jacob here with us, so I'll just have them briefly introduce themselves. So Jacob.
Yep. Hello everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name's Jacob. I'm a senior account manager here at Flow Power. Relatively involved with demand response as well, with working with our customers so that they can do that and save a bit of money.
Yeah. So any customers on the line, you probably recognise Jacob's voice, and we've got David as well.
Hi, I'm David Evans. I'm the Director of Engineering and Projects. I also work a lot in with Jacob in the demand response space and helping our customers use energy more efficiently or more effectively.
Thanks, David. So just to get started, we'll want to try and move the slide forward somehow. There we go. Oh, there we are. Look at that. There's Matthew, David, and Jacob, if you didn't see us. So just briefly, Flow Power. We're a licensed electricity retailer, but we're very much focused on wholesale electricity and demand response as part of that. So, you know, what we are is an electricity retailer that aims to make available all the same tools that your current retailer uses to buy your power. So that often means derivatives and financial tools, as well as access to the spot market, but also access to the large scale renewables as well. And corporate PPAs is something we're doing a lot of.
We essentially provide an alternative to the fixed peak and off-peak prices that most people are familiar with and have purchased electricity for most historically.
Yep.
So what we offer is a fundamentally different and alternative to those, with a driver of trying to reduce costs for customers. And one of the ways in which we do this is what we're talking about today is demand response. And we'll explain a little bit more how that effectively can reduce your costs.
Yeah. So just briefly, when you have wholesale, you can still achieve, broadly speaking, a very fixed price outcome. But one thing that's common with all our solutions that we offer to the market is they all benefit from demand response. So whether you're just on naked spot, whether you've got a corporate PPA, or whether you're actually largely hedged or got a swaps and caps in place, you can still always benefit from wholesale. So it's something we strongly encourage for our business. So today we're going to obviously look at the opportunity of demand response. So we're going to look at the opportunity of demand response. We're going to look at the types of demand response that exists and talk about next steps and then go through questions. So demand response. So for those, I guess this is an example that I've often used in the past, is the electricity industry is quite unique when it comes to demand response. It's actually very, how do you put it? It's very, it gets an advantage from it very, very easily.
Yeah, and it's a relatively immature space in the Australian market.
It is. So the electricity network, if you try to compare it to, say, the road network, you've got, everyone knows what peak hours like. You get on the road at sort of 9 a.m. or 8 a.m. and it's, you can't get anywhere. It's bumper to bumper traffic. Our electricity industry so far in the marketplace has been designed not really like the road network. It's been the electricity market. If our road network was designed like the electricity market, you'd be able to get on the road at any time of the day, 8 a.m. and you'd just get to it straight away.
Statistically, we'd only have peak traffic for 11 hours of the year.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is what our electricity market, our electricity infrastructure is actually is used at capacity for.
Yeah, so we've come from a place where, like the SEC days, it was designed around just using power whenever you wanted, and the nature of the electricity industry is such that it's not a very good idea, because, like David said, you only have 11 hours a year where it gets constrained. And if you can do something different during those very short spaces of time, it makes a massive difference to the cost. It's a huge difference. So far we've come from a network that tried to allow you to do whatever you want, however you wanted, but it's just not realistic. And I guess maybe that's why we're seeing such high power prices. It's one of the reasons anyway, because of the way we're using the power. So fundamentally, why do we need to do this? So it really does reduce your network demand charges. You've got network tariffs that have demand components to them.
And the network charge being one of the biggest components on the bill.
Yep.
Obviously, it's effective one to target.
Yes, it is. You've got it helps manage reliability, and now when we say that, we're talking more, network reliability, not so much your own reliability, but it can if you're constrained, if your transformer's not big enough. But overall, if we have a market that responds to demand, rolling blackouts, for example, would happen less often.
Can be avoided, yeah.
Could be avoided. You can obviously reduce your actual energy costs, so that's where wholesale comes in. If you have demand response with wholesale, you can do a lot better. And obviously, as we move forward, peaking generation, the sorts of generation that fills that gap at those 11 hours is often very expensive generation. So over time, the more demand response we bring into the market, the bigger impact it will have on reducing the overall market costs. And we've got some good examples of that we want to talk about a little bit further. So in the marketplace, if we were to implement all the demand response that we can, we would end up, there's been market studies completed that suggest there's probably about 3 gigawatts of demand response available in the market today that currently isn't being utilised.
Untapped, yeah.
Untapped. And that has a massive impact on the cost of energy. So I think it's equivalent to level power stations, something like that in terms of
almost two power stations. Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge.
In other words, we could issue with replacing the concern that we have about Liddell being closed, and the impact on the market could be solved nearly twice over by simply implementing a demand response mechanism in the Australian market.
Yeah.
As is common in other countries.
Yeah, that's right. So, and the impact that's 3 gigawatt hours is a lot of power, and to have an impact on pricing, we don't even need that much. Because of the nature of pricing in the electricity market, it's the, what do you call it? The
marginal amount.
The marginal generator that actually is the last one to dispatch sets the price. So that
very small
quantities. Very small quantities. So, for example, in SA, if we had been able to reduce the demand there, it would have reduced the entire state's power cost by 2.7 cents. Not even that's not even looking at what the customers would have benefited from who actually reduced their demand. It would have actually reduced the entire market costs by 2.7 cents, which is enormous. That's huge. So the demand response stuff really is tangible in terms of the benefits it can give. And we haven't even really gone through all the areas that it can. We will get to that.
I think that's what I'm going to do.
Yes, we're going to get David to talk a little bit about the types of demand responses.
Thanks, Matthew. So broadly, we kind of group demand response into a couple of different categories, and one we call market, which is more formal contracting of customers' load, where they enter into an agreement either with a retailer or some aggregator, or possibly directly with the market itself, where they agree to provide load curtailment or load shedding under certain conditions, whether it be for certain periods of time at certain times of the year. And in exchange for that, the customer is generally rewarded through either an availability or an activation payment. So we'll talk about some other examples of that shortly, but effectively that means where the customer is receiving a financial benefit for offering up the curtailment capacity or the ability to reduce load, which ultimately is supporting the market. The other main benefit of the demand response that's emerging, and it's a rapidly emerging space, is the ability to integrate with renewable generation, which we talk about as non-firm or sometimes referred to as intermittent. These sources of generation can vary, and obviously meeting that supply-demand equation can be done with obviously additional forms of generation like fossil fuel, but can also be met with demand response. And demand response is certainly the lowest cost and easiest and fastest to implement it in the market.
So that's when we've got customers out there that are essentially pumping when the wind's blowing, and they stop
Correct.
pumping when it's not.
When the sun's shining or the wind's blowing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's right. Yep. And it works. It's an awesome outcome, actually. Awesome situation when they can do that.
And a very simplistic, which Matthew touched on, version of demand response is simply buying from the wholesale electricity market, or primarily the spot market, and using what we call a physical hedge against the market. So instead of taking a financial or paying a financial premium for the price certainty, you can actually achieve a similar or generally a lot better outcome through using physical response. So physical response can be done in a number of ways, through shifting load or potentially switching over to generation on site. And the reward there is effectively accessing the lows of the market and avoiding the very high costs of the market. And we'll talk about a little bit about how that works in the following slides. There are some other more formal programs out there that are operated by networks, so such as Critical Peak in the SP AusNet area, or AusNet services as they're now known. That's a great example of where customers are encouraged to reduce load of 5 what they call critical peak days of the year, and the savings on the customer's network or demand charge in particular can be substantial.
About 30-40%, I think.
Yeah, it's massive.
Yeah,
opportunity for customers. So it can mean that it can make the difference for a customer to look at investing in some technology or potentially on-site generation to be able to reap those benefits, and they're ongoing.
Yeah.
Okay, next slide, please. One particular program that I did want to touch on was what we call the RERT program, which is the Reliability and Emergency Reserve Trader. Now, that's a program that's been implemented by AEMO over the last 2 summers, or previous summer and also this summer. The RERT program is one where customers are effectively contracted either through an aggregator or, in our case, through the retailer to provide their load curtailment in response for either an activation payment or a availability payment, or sometimes both. So essentially what AEMO are trying to achieve there is dealing with a potential shortfall in the market to avoid potential rolling blackouts or load shedding. They operate this reserve emergency trader, which is the RERT program, and effectively the reduction in load is able to maintain the stability and the price in the market. So it's a great opportunity for customers to actually jump on board and get involved with. We're involved in the RERT program in South Australia, New South Wales and Victoria.
So when I said that you can contribute to system reliability,
it's a great way to do it.
Those customers are directly contributing. So AEMO really only calls on that when they're worried about the lights going out.
Yeah, and one of the conversations we've had, I think many times with customers, is that in effect you are improving your own reliability. You know, if AEMO is calling on the reserve, it's because there is a problem in the market, and by you participating or customers participating, you're effectively improving the reliability not only for the whole market but also potentially for yourself.
Yeah,
so it's a really important part of the overall stability of the network.
Very tangible, that one.
Okay, so next slide. So really to just talk about how, in a very simple example, how that works, and the diagram there shows that in response to price being the green line and the orange line being effectively the customer's load. In this particular example, on notification or a pending high price event, the customer actually curtails and avoids high prices in the market. So these could be a half hour to an hour, or generally under sort of 2 hours in the market typically is what we see in terms of high priced events. And in that, the customers avoided the high cost of the peak prices during those intervals, but has also returned back to normal operation during what we call lower pricing or normal pricing. So the important point with this is to understand that when you are paying a fixed rate with your current retailer or any retailer that provides any fixed rate products like a peak and off peak price, you are effectively paying a risk premium that's built into that includes the value of what the market is forecasting for high price events. So in essence, this premium is paid regardless of whether or not there are any events in the market. So often a better way and a much more efficient way is to have the capacity, if you can do it, to deal with those high prices through physical response, and then only responding when you actually need to. And effectively, the outcomes are that you're avoiding the risk premium that's built into those rates, so you're accessing a generally lower underlying price in the market. And this savings can be substantial.
Yeah, the risk premium is worth a lot.
Yeah, we typically, year-on-year average, we typically sort of see 30% below the market as an average kind of outcome through demand response.
I think Q1, you could argue the risk premium, but just by looking at the cap price in Q1 in Victoria, for example, which is like the price above 30 cents a kilowatt hour that they're predicting,
yes,
it's currently at 4 cents a kilowatt hour in theory.
So that's effectively meaning you could avoid about 4 cents a kilowatt hour off your Q1 bill simply through implementing a physical response. So it doesn't take long to add up those sort of numbers to come up with a reasonably good business or solid case for implementing some demand response activities.
Yeah, it's pretty huge.
So again, I mentioned the direct program previously, and this is an example of Vic and SA. And we have two different programs that we run. One is a 10-minute response and one is a 60-minute response program. And obviously that depends on the customer's ability to curtail how quickly they can respond. The 10-minute requires some automation or some integration of technology that we call our K-Watch controller, which directly interfaces to the customer's equipment that is under control. And the 60-minute is often either usually a manual or an operator sort of shutdown or reduction of load. But in principle, the way in which it works is a sequence of time over which we will be notified or called by AEMO to say that they require a certain volume of load to be curtailed at a certain time. And from that point, we obviously immediately notify our customers. And Jacob's going to run through an example of exactly how a notification system works. Customers then respond and acknowledge that they want to participate. And during that period, obviously, we then send the signals to the remote sites and obviously notifications to the sites that are manually controlled. They then reduce load to that period. And then the end result is that that load reduction is measured by the market or by AEMO, and then AEMO effectively pay an amount of money for that reduction of load. And then that's passed through to the customers who participated. So again, a really great way of benefiting from some demand response capacity in the market. Yeah, and the payments are quite generous in terms of we certainly the feedback from our customers is certainly worthwhile doing it. In fact, I think we had a significant increase in the number of customers wanting to participate this year based on our results from last year.
We've still got actually capacity to take on more customers into the AEMO REP program.
We do, particularly in South Australia. We've got some capacity there that we could take up for the 60-minute product.
Great.
It's worth noting there as well, David, that there is both availability and activation payments as well. So some customers that are involved in the ARENA program will just be paid even if they don't respond to demand for the year.
Yeah.
So just by putting their hand up to say, hey, I can do this, they're going to get a financial benefit as well.
Great. Yeah, that's a very good point. Thanks, Jacob. So move on to the next slide. So one of the things I wanted to sort of final points I wanted to cover in my section was just talk about the different types of demand response. So largely you can talk about simple ways in which a customer can get involved right through to some complex. So an example of this is a simple demand response solution might involve switching over to a generator or managing demand through storage of product or energy. So water, not pumping when prices are high is a really good example, or storing product to the extent that you can. And examples of thermal storage as well can also include like pre-cooling or preheating, or ultimately batteries would also fall into that category. And more complicated, so certainly more other types of demand response would include things like shifting operational times for manufacturing processes or other types of processes where they occur generally at peak time. So it may be possible to move some of that load to generally a lower volatile period of the market, which obviously improves the the outcome for the customer. And then you move into more technical solutions where you can actually integrate directly with equipment. So whether it be motors or furnaces or air conditioning equipment, again, or refrigeration compressors, to directly control those loads through the automation. And I think this is, again, a next wave of technology that's really exciting to see, that technology is really enabling customers to participate in demand response much easier than they would have otherwise. So where things can be integrated and controlled relatively seamlessly, it enables the customer to participate quite without any major operational impacts.
Yeah, and they're really good setups when you can automate it end to end. I know it's not always possible, and you definitely don't have to, but that's one of those things that's great when you can actually achieve that goal. There's no customer interaction.
Yeah, and technology is coming out into the market that is effectively designed around demand response behaviour, which is really exciting to see. So some basic examples of different types of demand response that exist out there. So, the grey circle there, is around peak load management. So, some examples there. So electric, hot water, tariffs and things like that are good examples of managing peak load. Generation, where you're looking at either cogeneration, on-site solar, sort of micro generation plants on the customers, right through to the right-hand side where we talk about behavioural changes. And the behavioural ones are probably some of the more interesting ones that customers often don't know about or haven't yet discovered, where they can actually make operational changes. And I talk about an example of where we had a customer who had a peak demand around the afternoon period, and they actually said, well, we aren't operating around that particular period. And it turned out that that's when the cleaning was being done in the building. Mm-hmm. And that small change meant that their load dropped off during, the evening peaks and the weekdays and in summer, meant they effectively were insulating themselves from the what we call the volatile times of the market. Yeah. And a really, really simple change to make.
Yeah. So demand, it's a bit like, I guess part of getting involved with demand response is you start to bring in how you use your power a lot more.
Exactly.
Where in the past, back to my example about the cars on the road, you didn't care 10 years ago how you used your power. But now you start to think about, what is happening at 6 p.m? Like, why is that demand going up? And sometimes the solutions or the sorts of things that are going on can be very simple to change.
Yeah, and a key thing is about connecting customers to those pricing signals. So through a traditional peak off peak, it's a very blunt pricing signal.
Yeah.
And so what we aim to do is provide customers with more real pricing signals in the market that allow them to benefit in the way that Matthew mentioned.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing that's shifting a lot in the market to make all this far more feasible is the technology. Technology is a really big one.
Correct.
It's electricity is very subject to influences from changes in technology and things like IoT, Internet of Things, where you can control things through the cloud, and the quantity of data coming back. It gives new tools to be able to do things you couldn't do. So
absolutely,
it's very cool.
So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Jacob, who's going to run through a actual practical example.
Yeah, very good. Thanks for that, David and Matthew. So I'm going to quickly run you through how an event takes place and how we kind of help our customers to actually be able to respond and participate in these events. And then I'll actually run you through a real life example for one of our actual customers that is responding to demand and benefiting from that as well. So firstly off here, we've got how an event actually takes place from our end and from the customer end. So we're always forecasting, we're assessing what the market's doing and looking for potential high price events, and also speaking with AMO about the worst events that David and Matthew went through as well. So firstly, we're looking for that. If we think that an event is likely, we're going to notify the customers to say it's likely that we're going to have an event this afternoon between say 4 and 6 p.m. As we approach that, we'll confirm that the event is going ahead and notify our customers to begin to shed load. As the event goes on, we'll either notify the customer to continue to shed load or that it's okay to start back up again. Once the event ends, the customer can resume normal operations.
One of the key things there is like that forecast. It's unusual that you don't have prior, like a good day warning at least that something's likely to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And generally know when it's going to be super hot, right?
That's right, and that's what drives it mostly is temperature and load in the market. So yeah, it's not it's usually not, and it can be, but it'd be rare that it's, oh, you got a load shed in the next half hour.
Correct. And for those ones, those unscheduled events, they are very short-lived as well.
They are.
Yeah. So usually, yeah, like David said, it's going to be the end of the third or fourth day of a heat wave, when everyone comes home at 4 or 5 p.m. and turns their air conditioner on. So the way we contact clients as well for our notification system, we have a few different categories. Oops, sorry. So firstly, we have a general contact. So that would be somebody, a stakeholder that's not necessarily on site shutting any systems down, but they want to be aware because they want to, make sure these things are happening and make sure everything's okay. So usually a general manager, someone like that. The next step, we have our primary contact. So that's the person that we're going to notify that's going to actually start the process of shutting down. Now we first go to him or her and we send them out some messages. If they don't respond within a 5-minute time frame to say, yes, we've received your message and we're going to start shutting down or whatever it may be, we go on to the secondary person. In this case, we've got a 2IC, but that can be anybody on site that can receive those messages. And likewise, if the secondary contact doesn't respond to us to say that they've got the message, we start bothering the third one, the backup. And we just keep doing that until we do get someone to say, yes, we are responding and we have started to shed load.
Yep. And those responses could trigger, well, they could be action for that operations manager to go out and actually turn something off, or they could be, once they respond, that could then goes back to our systems, and then our systems dispatch the action to shut something off.
That's right. So
it could be automated, or it could,
that's
be,
right.
It could be manual.
Correct.
Depending on your setup.
Okay, so we'll run through our example here as well. So this is we do have a number of cool stores on our books as customers, and a number of them will follow this kind of reasonably simple procedure. So like I said, we do try and get as much notice out to our customers as we can. So usually we're talking about kind of 9 a.m. in the morning. We will say that there's a high likelihood that an event will occur this afternoon. And as we get closer, we let you know that it's actually going ahead. In this case, Travis, he runs a cold store in Victoria. Again, it's on the back of those that heat wave. So we've had 3 hot days in a row. I think we've got those there. So it's the 3rd day of a really bad heat wave. Travis gets his forecast text message to say that there's an event likely to occur between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. So in preparation of this, Travis actually turns the power up on the fridges by cooling them down further than he actually needs to go, which we'll go through this next one. So sorry, I think I've actually skipped ahead of myself. But anyway, so Travis is prepared. He's aware that something's coming. He gets a link to click, which gives him all the details of the event so that he can approve that and let us know that he's aware that that's happening. And then he can start to prepare for the event and let the people on site know what's necessary to be done. So in preparation, what Travis starts to do is to pre-cool the refrigerators, so below 5 degrees, which can be automated. As Matthew said, we can do that with our K-Watt controllers. So as long as Travis clicks approve, we would start to cool the fridges down further for him.
So you might be able to bring him down to, 3 or 4 degrees or something.
Yeah,
like that.
correct. So he could bring the refrigerators down to 3 degrees. Once the event actually starts, they'll turn the power off to the fridges, keeping a close eye on the temperature though, of course, because in this case, if it say goes above 6 degrees, that might be a lot of trouble for them for their produce. So we can set a limit on that. If the fridges do get to say 5.5 degrees, even if the event's still running, you might turn the fridges back on. Because as David said before, the first benefit you're getting on wholesale is you're not actually paying for those risk premiums. So you're already avoiding those extra costs for the fact that the events might happen. And then on top of that, he's already saved quite a bit of money by avoiding half of the event, even if he does actually have to turn on in the back end of that.
Yeah, there's a great example where the customer's actually using thermal storage.
Yeah,
it's actually
correct.
using a large cool room as effectively a store of energy during that event.
Yep.
that resource.
And it is a bit flexible in terms that it's not strict. Like it's not, if his temperature rose back up, it's not a case that he has to risk his operations or
Not at all. No.
And that never plays into it. He will lose a little bit out, maybe financially, marginally, but that's what.
But as Jacob said, he's effectively already avoided the risk premium. So even if he ran through the event, statistically, you'd prove very easily that he's well ahead of the fixed price market anyway.
That's right. A lot of our customers actually do look at it as any demand response they can do is cream on top. They already know that they're kind of receiving a better price on wholesale anyway. So even if they can shut down for, I think David said there was 11 hours worth of events in Victoria for the last year, which I think is about right.
Yeah.
Somewhere around that number. So any demand response you're able to do through those hours is just going to be a little bit of extra revenue for you guys. And I think we've got the results for Travis on the next page here. So yeah, so he responded to the event. In this case, he was able to shut down for the entire time, and resulting in an avoided cost of around $100,000 there, which isn't necessarily untypical, especially for these larger businesses that are saving in excess of that much money during an event. In Travis's case, he wasn't actually signed up to RERT, but if he was, he can actually gain additional revenue through those programs. And as we've probably touched on, it is likely that those are going to run at the same time. So lots of our current customers will be responding to a wholesale event already to avoid high pricing. And then they get called on for RERT and they're already shut down and they actually get paid for that in addition. So in this case, we've got the outcome for him. So he's avoided over $100,000. Additionally, he could be receiving more money in availability payments and activation payments from registered RERT programs. So next steps, we are running a test event in the last week of November for our customers. This will be in the same week that we run our tests for the RERT programs, which we're doing for Victoria and South Australia. We had our New South Wales RERT test earlier this month. So if you're interested in learning a bit more or you want to see if your site can participate in demand response or how it might benefit you, please give us a call and we'd be happy to talk you through it.
Yeah, so we're for our demand response stuff, we got to get ready for this summer. So please give us a call if you want to have an assessment to see if you can partake. We can very quickly discuss the benefits of that, what you might get from getting set up.
A specific case, yeah.
Specific case. We obviously, for anyone that's already participating, and I think we've got some customers on the line at the moment, make sure we know who your contacts are, make sure you're involved in that test so you can just test your systems and make sure everything's working as expected, make sure you understand the messages that you're getting from us as we send them out. And obviously we've got these tests, so we'd strongly encourage everyone, even those that are thinking about it, could partake in the tests feasibly, just to trial it and see how it goes within the business. But testing is very important as we approach summer, and summer is the critical period for us. For anyone doing demand response, it's the period where volatility is most likely to occur. And this particular summer, for those partaking, probably should expect some volatility. The market is predicting it, so be ready, basically, and yeah, make sure you're all signed up. So I think we're at the point where we're ready to get into some questions. So please, I think on your screen, if you've got any questions there, we can start to go through and answer those. So I'll just have a quick read of where we're at with the questions and see if we can start to answer some of them. So I've got a few questions here. Someone's asked, how will battery storage play a role in demand response? Does David, do you want to have a go at that?
Sounds like your cup of tea.
Yeah. Yeah. So ultimately, the battery can be used in the same way that curtailment of load or an on-site generator can be used, in that the battery would temporarily supply the power to the site and effectively reduce the load off the market. So it's a very effective way, and it obviously can operate extremely quickly. So it's able to respond in fractions of a second. and be able, and generally speaking, the sort of timeframes that we need to deliver with a sort of 1-2 hour period, the battery could be a very effective way of doing that. Each case is specific, and you need to look at the economics of a battery. And again, we're happy to talk to you about around those economics and whether or not that specifically makes sense for your application.
Yeah, and I will actually just on that particular topic. Batteries, in terms of demand response, are a really exciting technology.
They are, yeah.
They are still quite expensive. But if anyone out there has an interest in batteries, give us a call, because there are a few programs we're looking at to help encourage the battery installations, and it may include some government funding and so forth. So, if you're interested, let us know. We're keen to get feedback from those customers that are interested in that, which is hard not to be, but it is quite an exciting thing. But let's see. If you are, give us a yell and we can look at it. Someone's also asked how a generator would work in demand response as well. I'm going to give that one to David again.
Okay. So a generator, again, can supply power to the site during the event periods and effectively reduces the site consumption off the market. So it is a really effective way of providing demand response, because it's not requiring the customer to necessarily have any reduction in power available or use any less power. It's simply being supplied from a different source, in this case, a generator. At this point, generators, in terms of comparison to batteries, are significantly cheaper, and obviously they can supply, backup or emergency power supply. So this could be a good example where generators, the business case for using the generator to buy from wholesale market, can also supplement your decision around backup or emergency generation. So definitely worth looking into.
Cool. And generators are a great tool, and a lot of people just have them sitting there, don't they? So
there's a lot of, also great point, there's a lot of underutilized generators, and we're talking about minimal operation times of the year, which would generally be less than the number of hours you'd have to run it for its maintenance purposes.
Yeah. So, and all the demand, like there's no reason to exclude. Like it's not an environmental thing, demand response. In other words, you will still get paid for it under RERT and so forth, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
So if you provided it, so that's all fine. And probably the other thing I mentioned, if you do bring in your backup generation into the program, there's side benefits too, in that you're going to test it. It'd have to be ready. You'll have to make sure it's running. So from a backup point of view, it becomes more reliable. If we automate it, then it's even more reliable, because testing it becomes really simple.
So, it does. Yep.
It does. Did you mention synchronization? Because that's the other thing that's really cool with generators, if you can synchronize.
I haven't, no, but you can mention that.
So if you can synchronize a backup generator with the grid, that's a fantastic outcome. Because when it's synchronized, you can start up the generator, synchronize with the grid, and transfer your power across to it, and the lights don't even flicker.
Yeah, seamlessly.
Completely seamless. So it means any site could do it, no matter what their operations are. So it's a very cool technology. A little bit of work to get it in place, but once it's in place, it's a great outcome. So Jacob, someone's asked me, do you have to completely shut down to participate?
No, not at all. So very few of our customers would actually be completely shutting down, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Most of them would be shutting down their non-essential supply. To give kind of an example of that, lots of our irrigation companies that are using a lot of electricity for irrigation will have pumps that run from the river into the dam, and then from the dam onto their trees or whatever it may be. And as long as the dam is, around 70 or 80% full, say, they have no problem turning all those river pumps off. So that's one example where they might shut down 50+% of their load, and get a great result as well. The ones that would be completely switching off their load are most likely using generators, as you've just gone through.
Yeah. And we've got some irrigators that do that as well, don't we? Completely shut off. Yeah. Can we partake in Queensland, David?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Queensland doesn't have a RERT program as such, but it does have a wholesale market, and the wholesale market, again, as we explained, you can effectively buy from that market using a physical hedge through demand response and achieve the same low price outcomes that you would in any other state.
Yes. Yep.
There are also some, and interestingly enough, Queensland also has some network opportunities again that through the local distribution networks, where they'll essentially provide some incentives for customers in certain areas to offer up some capacity on the network. So that can also be a reasonably substantial financial benefit.
Yeah, so that'll depend on your geographical location. So you just have to contact us to find out.
Absolutely, yeah.
So someone's asked what happens if I don't respond. So Jacob, is there any penalty if you don't respond?
No, there's no penalty for any of the programs that we spoke about, whether that be the RERT programs or in fact not responding to wholesale. I mean, obviously you're not going to receive the benefit of the savings or the payments, but you're not actually going to be penalised in any way if you don't respond.
Yeah, and following on from that, will my power be cut off during an event?
So me again?
Yeah.
Certainly not. So the only time I guess your power would be cut off is if the grid was so stressed and nobody did any demand response, then it
all
might
the
be,
lights go in.
Yeah, exactly. It might be involuntary demand response. But no, if you were to participate in any of these programs, you'd never be forced to shut off or have your power cut off for that matter.
Yeah, and you're, in theory, you're less likely to be shut off because you're helping to fix the problem that's there. So does Flow Power service smaller businesses? So we service businesses all the way down to 100 megawatt hours or thereabouts. So that's a relatively small business. So I guess just get in contact with us, let us know. But we don't do residential, obviously. So smaller businesses, I would say yes. Probably not fish and chip shops.
That's right.
Yep.
But if it's a big one, you're welcome to contact us.
Yeah, that's right. So, yep. David, is there a cost to participate?
Not directly, other than if you need to look at implementing some changes or some technology, integrate some technology into site, there could be a relatively small cost, but certainly the benefits that are available through these programs would substantially outweigh or certainly return on investment would be very, very quick in terms of recovering those costs through these programs. So it depends on what you're trying to do, whether you're looking at and what type of operations you have as to what sort of integration costs there might be. But typically it's not significant in the overall benefits of the program.
So someone's asked whether or not there would be any benefit for a site that's operated on a seasonal basis. For example, a pumping station used for environmental flooding. But broadly speaking, seasonal, yes. It would work.
Seasonal loads often have some of the best benefits.
Yeah, a huge amount of our customer base would be operating on a seasonal load.
So, sorry, I'm just trying to read that question. So someone's asked about whether or not we've got any clients that do refrigeration, and well, the answer to that is yes. It was actually our case study.
Quite a lot, in fact, I'd say.
So they've asked whether or not the DR periods are too long for refrigeration.
No, and our experience is that, as Jacob provided the example, which in fact was a refrigeration customer, obviously freezers are a good example. We have very, very long thermal inertia. Some of those freezers can operate for days without, power. Not that we're suggesting anything like that, but refrigeration sites can generally tolerate, 1 or 2 hours relatively comfortably without any impact, and often substantially longer. So it's just looking at specific circumstances and what activities are going on during those times. Again, having some warning is really helpful because you can obviously plan around those. You may in fact bring some of the shifts in to occur where the fridge or freezer doors are opening through earlier parts of the day when it's a bit cooler, or that there's a lot of volatility in the market. So there's a number of things that can be done, but absolutely refrigeration is a really great example where there's a very largely untapped demand response resource.
Yeah. Well, thanks, David. That's good. I think we've probably got to the end of our time. So there's still a few more there to get through. But what we'll do is we'll contact anyone there that we didn't get across those questions for.
Answer them offline. Yeah.
Yep, answer them offline. But yeah, I think we're now at, we're at our 45 minutes. So we'll call it to a close. So I appreciate everyone's time coming together today. I think hopefully you've learned a little bit about demand response. And for anyone that is a little bit interested in learning more, please don't hesitate to give us a call. I do actually think, our view of demand response is it's key to the future of the electricity market and where we're going. And more customers will do it. So it's going to become more and more normal, and the benefits are tangible and real. And we see our job is to try and make it as simple as possible for you. So give us a call if you're interested. And I appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you all soon.